If we look to the canonical Gospels, for example, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they don't say much about Jesus' youth apart from the bit in Luke 2 that we said. And there's the infancy Gospel of Thomas, but that's been all but really rejected. And we don't know much really from a theological point of view about Jesus' youth. So from an archaeological point of view, what were the findings of the investigation in which you posed about Jesus' house or house, a similar house to that?
Well, first I should say that my friend and colleague Joan Taylor, Professor Joan Taylor at King's College London, the university I'm attached to at the moment, is writing a book called Boy Jesus about Jesus' childhood from primarily textual sources, using archaeological evidence, including my evidence, as part of that, but primarily looking at textual sources. And I think that involves a reconsideration of just how much we can authentically know, or know with some degree of probability about Jesus's childhood. So that will be out, I think, in 2025, and I can't possibly talk about the conclusions, etc. here. That's for you to interview Joan. I'm sure I'll be happy to talk. But that will cast new light on Jesus's childhood, as through particularly the perspective of texts. So far as I'm concerned, archaeology can tell us quite a bit about what it would have been like growing up in Nazareth, even from the data we already have. So we have evidence that it's an agricultural community, a deeply religious Jewish community following Jewish religious law, hence all the exclusion of Roman provincial artifacts. Not an impoverished community. There's no evidence that it's especially impoverished compared to other rural Jewish villages of its time. Not necessarily an especially poor place, but not necessarily an especially small place either. We just don't know, in the light of what I was saying, how big Nazareth was when Jesus was living there. It could have been anywhere between a hamlet, which is what it's usually described as by archaeologists, on really, in my opinion, no good evidence, to a large village, which is equally plausible. But the courtyard house, if that's what it is, the Sisters of Nazareth, and there is another house from early first century Nazareth, just across the modern road from the Sisters of Nazareth, at the International Marian Centre, the ecumenical Christian centre. That house is also what might be classified as a Galilean courtyard house. So if those are both courtyard houses, they suggest a somewhat larger settlement than a hamlet. The Galilean courtyard houses, though rural, domestic family houses, do indicate slightly larger communities. So that's what I would say about that. We can see crafts working in early Roman Nazareth, agriculture, quite a lot of agriculture, quite a lot of agricultural installations found at the Church of the Annunciation, which, in my opinion, and the opinion of some of my archaeological colleagues, might indicate a centralized crop processing function for surrounding settlements. So you can imagine people coming to Nazareth from all those villages in the valley, at least on the Nazareth side of the valley. So maybe on market days, or I don't know, religious festivals, if they were a different time, maybe they could be the same days. We would have more people in Nazareth than on a typical work day, as it were. So one would expect there to be religious services held with religious orientated Jewish inhabitants of Nazareth. You would expect them to be engaging in collective worship in some way. I'm trying to carefully avoid saying going to a synagogue, because although there are first century synagogues in the sense of buildings, we now know archaeologically, whether someone like Nazareth would have had an actual synagogue building begs the question of how large it was, and might be for all sorts of other variables which we frankly don't understand. But it could have had a synagogue building. It could, as Jodie Magnus, the American, I think she would say, biblical archaeologist, has pointed out to me, have a synagogue that was a religious assembly outdoors, or potentially even in a building used for other purposes in daily life. So we can say there would have been a religious assembly there, but not necessarily a synagogue building, but there could have been. And so we can build up a picture of Jewish law and the Jewish calendar governing the sort of rhythm of the year, agricultural seasons, and the need to plant crops, harvest, etc., also affecting the rhythm of the year. Obviously, family life, creating a community in which there were people of different ages, craftspeople, as well as pure farmers. Obviously, the stoneworkers or quarry people, who were probably the same as the farmers, but doing these activities at different times of the year. And it's been suggested by another biblical scholar that it would have been quite a young community. He, a chap called Greg Jenks, has drawn attention to the fact that the anthropology and comparative historical evidence of village communities in the Middle East suggests that one would be looking at a younger community in age profile than we might imagine, not least because of limited longevity, but also people taking on what one might call adult roles at a younger age than we would think of. We're talking work here, crafts working, the child helping their mother or father, I don't know, in the carpentry workshop perhaps, but spinning, grinding corn. There are watchtowers, agricultural watchtowers in Nazareth, well, in the area around early Roman Nazareth that have been excavated. Those were for people to watch out for predators, animals in the fields. So one can imagine that while the fully grown adults were working on the fields or in the field, the kids might have been put up in the watchtowers to keep watch. And so there are many, many things that we can say about the Nazareth that Jesus would have grown up in. And I try to say these things in Archaeology of Jesus' Nazareth. And in fact, at the end of the book, I try to give a list of things that we can say pretty firmly, mostly from archaeology, but some of them textually, but mostly from archaeology, about what it would be like to live in early first century Nazareth.